Let's do that. Can you hear me now?
Can.
Okay. I don't see your screen yet, though.
Nope, I haven't hit the share button yet.
Okay. No worries. There it is. Logging in 720. Very good. Now, can you hold control down and do your mouse and get the text bigger on the screen? Yeah, stuff like that. That would be great. A little bit more if you got it, but I know it starts getting tight.
I'm gonna say it'll get tight if I'm
Yeah, no,
actually
that's good.
gonna show anything.
Yeah,
And then I've got a little bit of slide stuff.
excellent.
Just to kind of drive the conversation, and I don't know if there's a way like you can upload just the deck so that when I'm done they can access
Sure,
the deck.
I can attach the deck to the stream.
Okay,
so,
so I'll
yeah.
send you the deck afterward too.
Yeah, so I need to note that. Hang on, let me put that in my notes. Deck.
Do you want camera, no camera? Do you care?
Don't care. It's up to you. So it's just doing Teams, so whatever you display is displaying.
Let's see. I don't know which camera's driving me today. Waiting for one of the lights to turn on.
There you are down in the corner.
Yeah, I know. I'm just trying to switch cameras.
Gives it a little more personal touch, but
Did the camera show back up?
yeah, you're there full front, yeah.
Alright.
Now, let me try something here. I'm going to go on my other mic, see if you can hear me. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay, so you didn't hear me there. So I need to change my teams. Hang on. It's, where's my teams? Settings. Devices. Microphone. Yeti. I'm going to try it again.
Can hear you now. Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. So we're going to stay on Yeti the whole time.
Okay. Yep. Sounds good.
Good morning. How's everybody doing? Glad to have you here. Appreciate your time. Thank you for your valuable time today. With everything that's going on, boy, thank you, those people that are on the front lines. We really appreciate you, but I'm glad you're able to spend some time with us. We have some good stuff today, I think. Hope you're staying safe. I know we're still trying to manage those devices while everybody's everywhere now. So hopefully we can get some of that information to you that will help. This is ZENcast, and it's basically ZENworks discussions for you and whoever's a ZENworks administrator or even interested in ZENworks. Come on in, ask questions. There's a chat down there that we're monitoring. So go ahead and put things in there. There's some housekeeping we're going to do. So the comments, questions, commands down in the chat all work. If somebody mentions something in chat, you can put an @ sign in front of it and put their name, and it'll go direct. It'll highlight for them, so it'll go. You can have a conversation directly with them. There'll be some polls. You put an exclamation point, vote, and then some YouTube settings that we've found are a little bit better than the automatic. So appreciate you coming aboard. I did see some recent subscribers, so I appreciate some subscribers out there. We got Avinash and Balkrishna, Queen Leo, Alberto. So appreciate those subscribes out there. And this is for you guys. So if you guys want this to continue, find this a good forum, please feel free to let us know so that we can continue this. We're going through April. So let's go ahead and see what's going on. Next week, we're going to have Vikram Goyal come out. He was here last week. Next week, he's going to do some MDM Windows 10 stuff. So we're going to have a demonstration on that. Next week, also, some of the support staff is going to be talking about the DMZ because everybody's working from home and system upgrade scenarios. Okay, so be aware that that's coming next week. The next thing is we're going to have Jason on today. Jason Blackett, product manager of ZENworks Configuration Management, and he's going to go through some ZRS reporting. Sometimes ZRS can look big, right? So, and uncertain how to do things. Well, he'll walk us through those and show us how simple it really is. So, we're looking forward to having him on in just a little bit. Let's see. We have some news feeds here. So let's see what's coming up in conferences. So you were through April 12th, right? The ZENcast Live. Let us know if you want this to continue. We'll probably do it on less of a frequency, not every week, but more like every other week or once a month. And we're hoping to reach out to the other communities in Asia Pac and Europe. Also, the Virtual Universe Conference USA is coming up in May. They're going to make that one virtual as well. They had such a success with the last one that they're going to put this one virtual as well. And unknowing what the status is, obviously, that'll save people from having to travel and so forth. DTP USA is coming up in July in Provo, Utah. So be aware of that. And the weekend prior, they have some, if you come into the conference, you'll be able to go to some workshops, whether it's, I'm not sure which ones they're having, but in the past they've had Filer, IDM, ZENworks, a bunch of different ones. So keep looking at that, and the registration is there. So let's go ahead and look at product news. What do we got in product news? Okay, so the webinar series, Q2, we have one more coming up next week, another webinar. There's the link there. It's moved to WinPE based imaging by leveraging your existing ZENworks images. So you've already invested in those ZENworks images. How can you move to the WinPE? That's coming up next week. Actually, April 2nd. That's tomorrow. We're almost in April now. That's this week. So yes, this week. So stay tuned for that. Be sure to go out to the webinars and check on those. There are some past recordings you could see there from different types of products and different feature sets. The Q2 2020 webinar series is being developed at this time. So internally, we're trying to get those set up so that we can continue these valuable webinars for you. Let's see, we got forum news. So instead of listing all the different types of things I found in the forums, one thing to note is be sure to go out to the ZENworks community. The ZENworks community is really valuable. We'll be able to, if you look at, for instance, let me go ahead and turn this off. So it has the ZENworks community and forums. You can ask questions. You can see who else might be having the same issues. And get responses. Engineers watch this, developers watch this, as well as your peers, which really helps because the collaborative effort really gets some things taken care of here. So for you, so be aware that that is out there. It's a valuable space. The other thing is about the knowledge base. If you're doing upgrades to either Service Desk or ZENworks, just type in cookbooks, right? And you don't even have to choose a product at this point, and you'll find 5 of them, right? So we have the upgrade cookbook for 2020, upgrade cookbook for 2017. We have 11. If you're coming from 11.4, 11.3, and you need to get to 17, use that. There's videos in there. There's links direct to the documentation. Just know that those are there, as well as Service Desk version 7 and version 8 are out there. So if you're moving up and you kind of want to see how it's done, there's videos. If you want to see what the documentation or system requirements are, they're all there. So be aware that those are there. Very, very valuable. And of course, the documentation for ZENworks 2020 is out there. Know that the best practices is there. And one thing I did want to bring up, if we do Control F best, where is it? Let's go to it. There it is. Documentation release, DMZ configuration. Okay, everybody's working from home. We need to contact the devices, or the devices need to check in how to take care of that. So we do have some documentation out there regarding server connections, zone administration, device management, DMZ. Now, don't just turn it on. There are things that we're going to cover next week that will detail other items like the proxies, the firewalls, and certain things to turn off. Don't make it a ZCC server if it's in the DMZ. Things like that. So, but do know that this documentation out there, peruse through it. Next week, we're going to have a little more detail on that, and we'll be able to discuss it further. So that's some of the news out there. We are going to, let me see what we got next. We got display, yeah, discussion and news. I think we're just about ready for Jason Blackett. We're gonna have Jason come aboard, and he's going to. He has a slide deck up. Hello, Jason. How are you doing?
Good. How are you, Paul?
Very well, very well. Thank you for coming today and giving us some of your knowledge and expertise. I understand we're doing reports and dashboarding for ZENworks, so I appreciate you putting this together and taking the time out to come visit with us today. I believe chat can hear you. I can hear you, so I think we're good to go. The floor is yours.
All right. Thanks, Paul. I really appreciate the opportunity to present to this audience. I heard that there was some interest in ZENworks reporting, and that's one of my things I enjoy doing. So I thought I'd start by putting some slides together, but it's going to be a demo-heavy session. I've gone ahead and put the slides together, lots of screenshots, so that Paul can share this with you after the fact as well, so that if you need to use this as a guide, or you need to go back and present to somebody else, you can do that. But in the meantime, we'll go ahead and get into it. I'm going to spend just like 2 minutes on why ZENworks reporting, and then a little bit on what you need to be able to get started. But we're going to spend most of our time doing reports. So why ZENworks reporting? Well, first of all, it lets you analyze all of your endpoint data. So everything that's in the ZENworks ecosystem, basically. We have connectors for all of the core ZENworks products, CCM, asset management, patch management, full disk encryption, and endpoint security. We also have connectors that we've released through the community that let you connect to Service Desk and to Micro Focus desktop containers. So you can really report on everything, versus with the built-in ZCC reports, there's really a limited subset of inventory and asset data that you can create reports on. And so if you really want to be able to create those custom reports, even run some canned reports on things like patch management that go above and beyond the dashboards that we've started to introduce, then this is for you. Another interesting capability, we probably won't get into demo-wise here, but this is actually a way you can make some of that endpoint data available programmatically. ZENworks reporting actually has 2 capabilities built into it. Not a lot of people are using them. I'm not sure a lot of people even know they exist. But the first one is something called visualize.js, which actually lets you take a graph or a report that you've created, or even a dashboard you've created in ZRS, and surface that in some other tool that you've got. So maybe internally you've got a web page and you want to take a graph from ZRS and put it on that web page. You can do that pretty easily with just a little bit of JavaScript skills. And then the other one is you can actually take the output of any report that you create. Typically, you do this with tabular kinds of data. You can run that report and actually then provide REST access to that report. And so you could basically, create a report that had any data in it you wanted, and then open that up via REST API to some third-party system that maybe you want to pull the ZENworks data in from.
So it isn't just confined to the ZENworks domains.
Well, so it's the other way, right? I've got ZENworks data, and I've created reports on that ZENworks data, and now I want to take and get that data available to an external system via REST, right?
Sure.
And so maybe you've got a third-party application and you want to look up a particular device and pull some data into it. You could create a ZENworks report, expose that via REST, and now pull that data into your other application.
That's beautiful. Okay.
The other thing is it allows you to provide reports to everyone. So with ZCC, to run a report, you've got to be a ZENworks administrator. And most of the time, at least as I've talked to a lot of the technical folks, they don't really want the management kind of people in ZCC as much as possible, because they may not, know what they're doing there. And so as a result, with ZENworks Reporting, any LDAP user can go ahead, log in, and even local users. If you didn't have an LDAP source and you just wanted somebody, create a local account, you could do that, and they can run the reports. Or maybe you don't even want them to go into the reports. You can actually create scheduled reports, have those reports output to emails, send those on a regular basis to the important people, or have them exported onto an FTP server or a web server, so that then somebody can go view that report without actually having to ever log into anything. So those are typically the two key reasons that you're going to use ZENworks Reporting, is you want all of that data and you want to be able to provide it to the maximum audience. Now, to get started, here's what you need. First of all, you need an endpoint data source. As Paul's question was, can I report on other things? So obviously the underlying platform that we use with ZENworks Reporting is JasperSoft. In fact, if you were a commercial JasperSoft customer, meaning you purchased JasperSoft, all of our domains could be plugged in natively to JasperSoft directly. That then allows them to talk to our databases. But with ZENworks Reporting, there's licensing restrictions around it that allows you to use that Jasper instance that we've rebranded to ZENworks Reporting to really limit you to reporting on our databases. So the ZENworks database, the audit database, the service desk database, the desktop containers database.
And
so
what?
In the event.
Sorry, and what is the cost to the customer on ZRS? I mean.
So ZRS is included when you buy any of those products. So if you buy any ZENworks product, service desk, or desktop containers, ZRS is just in the box with it.
And you just prop up an appliance.
Yep. So that's the second thing you need. So first you've got to have one of those products. Second thing you got to have is a ZENworks reporting appliance. And so just like the ZENworks appliance, the Filer appliance, the iPrint appliance, so on and so forth, it's a Hyper-V, XEN, or VMware appliance that you stand up on your virtualization environment. Provides that web interface for creating the reports and dashboards, and then you have it ready to go. And then the third thing that you need in order to report against that data source with ZENworks Reporting is something called a domain. A domain is basically a mapping file, if you will, that makes it so that you can do the drag and drop reporting that ZENworks Reporting offers that knows how the database is laid out and what we want to surface to you from a reporting perspective. Apologies, I'm still getting over my son's cold that he gave to me.
So last week, just to interrupt, last week we went ahead and combined ZenWorks Zone to Service Desk and registered those two so they can import into Service Desk and be able to do the store. And then we put both of those domains onto a ZRS. Now, I didn't do Vertica. Maybe you can show that today, but we did do a little bit of demonstration just connecting them. So you're taking it to the next level.
Yeah, so we'll start to use that data to now report against data in both of those domains and even pass data back and forth in the reports. So just as a reminder real quick before we jump into some more demo, there's a few, the domains that you can get. If I go in and say, create an ad hoc report, the way that you see the domains is when you're selecting the data, right? And so here's all the data, and I actually have more listed in mine than you'll probably have in yours, because I've got some development domains that I've got some stuff I've pulled in from Cool Solutions, so on and so forth. But when you buy ZENworks and you you do your install and you point it at your primary server with ZENworks 2020, it's going to install the ZENworks audit domain, the ZENworks bundle domain, the ZENworks bundle Vertica domain if you tell it to. There's a checkbox that you have to check to say install the Vertica domains, the ZENworks domain, and the ZENworks patch Vertica domain. If you're on something previous to ZENworks 2020, you won't have the Vertica domains. If you're not using Vertica, you don't need the Vertica domains, so you wouldn't bring those in. Then you can go up to the community pages for the other two. So you'll see here, this is the Micro Focus Service Desk domain. Right now, version 1100 was the last one. There's actually one we've updated. I think there's a 1104 that's in development right now. If for some reason you needed that, I could provide it to you. But this one will provide you access to your CMDB items, your requests, the store information, and then any information about users and teams. And then you have the ZENworks Application Virtualization Server Usage Reporting Package. This works with both the old ZAV and the new Micro Focus desktop containers to be able to create reports against your usage of the virtual applications or the containerized applications. And we'll see that as we go along as well. So when you install domains, you do that from the reporting server appliance console. So you go to the 9443 port, maybe. Take a minute, it looks like. So you would go to the appliance portal, and there's a place where you can configure ZENworks Reporting.
So you're logging into the same appliance, but just in an administration portal at this point.
Yeah, so this is the administration portal on the appliance. So after you do your install, the first thing it's going to do is come up and actually kick you into this ZENworks Reporting configuration page to finish setting up ZENworks Reporting.
Because it has to attach to something. Yeah.
That's right. So the rule is it has to have at least something to connect to, otherwise it's useless, right? And so it'll ask you to set up your certificate, and then it'll go through this domain configuration step, and you'll be able to then say, I want to add, if you point to your ZENworks server, it'll automatically pull these ones in. And so behind the scenes, what it does is it actually makes a call to the server and says, first of all, what's there? And then second of all, where's the database? So it can set up the username, the password, the connection information so that it can establish that JDBC connection behind the scenes. For the other two, once you download the zip file, you click add, and then you specify a domain resource file. You pick the data source type, which kind of database are you using for that particular source. You pick the zip file that you downloaded from Cool Solutions, and then you have to give us the information about how to connect to that database, because on those other two, Service Desk and Desktop Containers, there isn't a definition file that says this is how you can connect to those. So you have to provide us that information. And once that's done, then, and you say, okay, it goes ahead and it creates all of the objects so that when you actually create it, you see this Micro Focus Service Desk domain. You'll see one called the ZAV usage domain. I have the Micro Focus Desktop Servers domain because I renamed mine. And then you'll see the ZENworks ones.
So these are canned reports?
No, these are domains.
So these are all the domains. Okay.
Yeah, these are all the domains. And so as we get into using the tool a little bit more, we'll talk about how you use it. But basically, if you see them in the list, then that means you've set up the connection and you should be able to use them for reporting.
In your life, yeah.
Once you have those three things, you're ready to start reporting. There's a couple different kinds of reports. Paul just asked about canned reports. So when you install ZENworks out of the box, there's a whole bunch of reports that we create. So if you just installed, you pointed at the ZENworks server, you came in here and you went to ZENworks, you would see a bunch of predefined reports. And these are reports that were actually created with Jaspersoft Studio, which we'll talk about towards the end. But they allow you to just find something that maybe you're interested in. What's my overall software compliance? Get the software compliance summary, click on it, and it's just going to run and give you the report, right? And so my overall here, I have a total of 6 purchase records, 17 reconciled products, 2,700 excluded products, so on and so forth. And so you can't really do anything with this report. It's just there for you to quickly get a quick view of software compliance. We're not going to spend a lot of time on canned reports because that's more or less something you can explore on your own, where you basically just come in here to the library and you can scroll through the library and see all the reports that we've created. Most of the ones we've created will show as reports. And then the ad hoc views are the things that often I've added into the system. And so you can come in there. There's not a good way to edit the canned reports. And so that's why you'll notice we kind of switched and started introducing these predefined ad hoc views. And so again, there's some of these that are ad hoc views. There are some of these that are reports. The things under here you really can't edit because you'd need Jasper Studio to do it. You have it, you could edit them. It's just not a trivial exercise. Versus over here, these are ad hoc views. They're things we've created. So if I came in here to the license usage information ad hoc view, for instance, it's going to open up a canned ad hoc view that we've created that we think you might, find interesting. So this one happens to be a crosstab report that shows you the usage data, right? And in here, you could make your changes pretty easy and then save them.
So this kickstarts your reporting then in that area.
Correct. Now,
excellent.
Again, most of our canned reports that you see in the library end up being those Jasper Studio reports, not these ad hoc reports. And so you'll really be starting from scratch on most of your ad hoc kinds of things because that's the flexibility. So that's where we're going to spend most of our time, is looking at ad hoc. And I'm going to drop in and start by just talking about some basic ad hoc reporting concepts. The first thing we'll talk about is the 3 different kinds of reports. So the three kinds of reports that you can build with ad hoc are a tabular report, so basically a table, a chart, so some kind of visualization of the data, and then a crosstab, which does math in the table, basically. So we'll start with table reports. The steps for most of these are very similar. So step one is you select the domain in the data. So by selecting the domain, you're saying, I want to report against this database. And then once you have selected the domain, you get asked, what data in that database do you want to report on? You'll drag the objects in the domain into columns and groups. Then you might change some formats and titles. You'll add some filters and sorts, and then you'll have your ad hoc widget or your ad hoc view. The ad hoc view is something that's easy to manipulate. You can change, but if you want to then turn that into something that you send on a regular basis to somebody and maybe pretty it up a little bit, then you turn it into a report. So let's look at kind of the basics here. So we're going to create an ad hoc report here, or ad hoc view, and I think we'll start with a service desk report. So I'm going to go ahead and use my service desk domain. And you'll see by picking the domain, I've told it report against my service desk. And so the things that come up that I can report against are all the service desky things. So I can grab some stuff about requests. I can grab the items. So this is all your CMDB things like the category, the items, the types, so on and so forth. And so we'll grab that. Say OK here. And now you'll see it brings in all of the different objects, is what they're called in the tool, that I can report on. And so I might want to say, okay, in this table report, so you pick the type of report you want. Maybe this is a report where I want to just see information about my CMDB. So I want to come in here, want to create a quick report and say, let's group this by category name. So here's all of the different categories that I've defined in my system. You notice some of them are, you're used to seeing here, like the appliance or the audio visual. There's probably some of these that you're not so used to seeing, like firearms. The nice thing about Service Desk, right, is it's a true CMDB, so it doesn't matter what asset you want to track the life cycle of. You can create a category for it, you can define the attributes associated with it, and throw it in there. And then maybe you want to further break that down by type. So again, we're grouping here. So it didn't go underneath, it created a new group. And so this appliance is not like a hardware or a software appliance. I've defined in mine, because I'm using this to help me also keep track of things like my own warranties. So I've got my dishwasher in there, my microwave, my oven, my refrigerator. And so that's a different type in each. And then I can start to bring in the actual item details. So I could bring in the item number, right? And so these are the item numbers that have been created. And you can see I've got some deleted data here. We'll get rid of that in a minute. I could bring in a description if I wanted to. I'm not doing much with description on items for the most part because I'm using custom fields. And so one of the really neat things the Service Desk domain does that isn't really easy to do kind of in Service Desk is get that kind of view, because here are all of the custom fields and you can add them. And so for instance here, each field has the same set of data. And I can say, well, let's put in field name. And you'll see that in an appliance, the first custom field is serial number. But for audio visual, the first thing is resolution. And for a car, it's the make of the car. And so then I can say, now bring in the field value, right? And now I can see, okay, so this is the data for that. And then maybe I want field 2, right? So I could go find field 2. And again, I can bring in the field name and the field value. And you can see, okay, here's who's holding the warranties on each of those, and so on and so forth. I've got an item warranty date, and that's when the warranty expires on each of those things. Right? And so now I have a simple report that kind of gives me that data of, we'll give it a name, item, and warranty date. And maybe you only care, you get looking in here and all you care about is those 2 things, right? All right, so now we're going to go ahead and we can rename some things if we want to. So maybe we know we're only interested in appliances for this report. So we could come in here now that we kind of have some feel for what this is and say, well, let's go ahead and create a filter out of our category and make it appliance. And everything that's not an appliance will disappear. And so we'll get rid of the category name. And so now we have that data. We know that now this is the same for everything. So rather than having this column in here, we can go ahead and we can edit the label on field value and say, let's call this warranty holder, because now we know that that's what it's supposed to be. And we'll go ahead and pull this off. And now we have the information about appliances and their warranty dates. So really simple tabular report or ad hoc that breaks it down then by each kind of thing that we have. We can then save this. And you can save it wherever you want. I'm going to go into, let's see, where did I put mine? Reports. I've got my ZenGuru reports. And I'll go ahead and say appliance warranty. And so now I've got my ad hoc view. Paul, are there any questions?
Not yet. And so that ad hoc view will then show up in your main list on in your library, right?
Correct. So now if I go to my library here, you'll see that I get my appliance warranty information, and I can run that anytime I want.
Run that, and it's good to go, and then modify it if necessary.
Correct.
Perfect. If you're just joining us, Jason Blackett, the product manager for ZENworks Configuration Management, has joined us with ZRS, ZENworks Reporting Services, and he's showing us some demonstrations on the capability of ZRS with different domains. So, Jason, I don't have any other questions here. I don't see anything in chat yet. So, if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in chat so that we can ask Jason those along the way. But go ahead, Jason.
Okay, great. So let's take a look at kind of the next slide. Once we've created an ad hoc view, we can then turn that into a report. So we're going to go ahead here and say we want to save the ad hoc view and create a report. And the report gives you more control over the look and feel. You can apply a custom template that maybe has your logo. There's actually a cool solution out there that has information on how to create a custom report template with your own header and footer and your graphics and those kinds of things. But I'm just going to go ahead and create a report again in ZenGrew here with the same name but a pending report, so we know it's based on that same ad hoc view. It's easy to keep it. So you'll see once that gets created, then when I go back to the library, now I have both the ad hoc report, which is kind of the editable thing that I maybe is the basis for what data I want in the report, and then I have the report itself.
That's like your build information and then your final product.
Yeah, essentially. And so you'll see here, it looks a little bit different once you bring it into a report. You can't, change columns or those kinds of things. You've got your logo up here in the upper right-hand corner. If you had filters, so here's my filter. If I wanted to change and say, well, show me some other kind of audio-visual thing, right? And say, okay, then all of a sudden this changes. The warranty date's still here, but again, this is kind of messed up because that data is not there. If you didn't want the user to be able to change this warranty holder, instead of defining the filter as a part of the ad hoc view, you'd actually define it as something called a pre-filter, and we'll look at that, which means the user can't change that data after the fact. All right, so the next thing you might want to do here is add some sorting, and so you can come in here and say, well, let's sort this descending, so we get the oldest expiration date to newest. Now, one thing to note is it sorts in groups. So you'll notice I didn't just change 22 is still here. That's because I've grouped here by dishwasher, microwave, oven, refrigerator. And so if I'd had, gotten rid of the group and just had the items listed, then it would have sorted. If I had multiple dishwashers or multiple ovens or multiple refrigerators, they would have sorted in the group.
Sure.
The other thing you can do here is you can add your own custom filters. So you can say, I only want to show data where that data is not. I guess I can't do not equal to blank, right? It doesn't like that one because it's a date. I want to get rid of this one. So, maybe you do something like, I noticed it's not there, so show me only rows where this is not equal to 10078. And so it reruns this, and now that row's disappeared. You can also do custom formatting. So this is where you start to change the look and feel. Maybe you want your headers to be a little bit bigger. 15. You want your detail rows. You can change the format pattern on the dates. So maybe you don't like this date format. You want this date format. So you say OK. And now the dates are reset. I was on that row, so that's the that column, so that's where the formatting changed. If I want to change the formatting on the others, I can. The other thing that you can do is conditional formatting. So conditional formatting basically allows you to say, based on certain criteria, do something. And so here, for instance, I might add and say, I want to say if it's on or before, if it's on or after, let's say it's on or after January 1st, 2021, then that's good, right? I don't have to worry about my warranty expiring. And so I'm going to go ahead and make that green because that's good. And I'll go ahead and make the text color white so that it stands out on the green. And so I'll say OK. And now it'll go through and it'll find everything that's on or after that date and change it to green. And so now somebody looking at this report has a really quick visual indicator that, okay, these are good, and maybe I could add a second criteria that says, okay, if the data is before that date, then make it red, because that means my warranty is going to be running out, and I need to know about that. And so then any rows where that was not met would turn red, and I'd have a quick red-green look at that.
So in the ZENworks part of this, if you have devices that are ready to retire or will be up for retirement next year, you can actually calculate out this report, and it can actually display those to you as well as quantities, so you can kind of know what your refresh is for your devices.
Right, so let me give you a quick tabular example of a report I've previously done that's kind of in the ZENworks space. So if I go to ZenWorks Guru Reports, I have this device health indicators report that I've created. And so I've picked a few different indicators of, is the device healthy or is the device not healthy? I've got what is the operating system, the agent version, hours since last contact, hours since last full refresh, hours since last patch scan, and is the device marked as lost in the system or not? Right, and so right now, I've got the device name is J Blackett, and so if I pick any other device in the system, this will update and change to show me the information. There it goes. Now that's my connected server. Right now I've got it set on a filter where it only shows one device at a time, but I certainly could rework this report to show a whole list of devices and then give you a quick red-green status on each of these, so that as you looked across the way, you could see, okay, this is the status of my device.
Sure. Or if you had like a 0-day patch that needed to be sent out, you can kind of see the status of that as well.
Correct.
Very, very, very good.
Okay, so let's look at this one in a little bit more detail because, for instance, we don't keep hours since last contact as a value. You won't find that anywhere in our domain. Okay? So let's go look a little bit more at some things that happened with that device health. And so this report is built on this device health indicators ad hoc view. So we're going to open up that ad hoc view. And there's a few things going on here that I want to point out. So again, first of all, I'm currently limiting this to just one device. So if I was to remove this filter altogether and say apply, now I'm getting the data for all of the devices. And then I'd probably want to go ahead and bring in the device's name so that that's a column in the list. The next thing is, again, hours since last contact is not something we like. If you scrolled through the device status here, you're not going to find that information in the list. So where did that data come from? And why did I choose to do that? Well, one of the key reason I chose to do that is when you do the conditional formatting, if you go back to the conditional formatting, it doesn't support relative date comparisons. What the domain gives me today is when was my last contact. So my last contact was today, right? And if I want to change the format on that, I could get the actual time. And so you can see that's the data that in the database we have. If I wanted to highlight that red green like I did in the actual report, the problem that I had is you can't say contact is on or before 1 day. You can only say contact is on or before this date in time, this specific date. But what you can do is you can do integer comparisons and real number comparisons, and you can say if it's less than this, then color it red. So I needed to get this in a way that I could actually color it. So let's pull last contact out, and I used a feature in ZENworks Reporting that's called calculated fields. And so basically what a calculated field is something you use some data to create your own field. And so if we take a look at hours since last contact over here, I created this custom field. And so let's pull that out. Sorry. If I right click, I can say edit that custom field. And then you can see that I'm using some math to convert that into what I wanted. And so in this case, I've said hours since last contact is going to be a formula that's built into the system called elapsed hours. And you can see it's the difference in hours between the first date and the second date. And then I've pulled in last contact, which we saw, I had earlier, that's in the domain. So I found it in this list of items. And so I had this highlighted here originally, and I just double clicked last contact and it added in last contact. And then there was another function in here called today, which says what is the current day. And so it then calculates the difference between today, right now, and the last contact time, and gives me the real number value. And so when I do that, I can click validate to make sure that I haven't made any syntax errors. I can also do summary calculations here. So, in tables like this, you can actually add summary columns. And so if you were to do that, what would you want it to do? Here, it probably doesn't make any sense really to have a summary calculation, because you wouldn't want to say, well, sum up the hours of all the last contacts, because that's not of any value.
Just not relevant, yeah.
Right?
Right.
But if this was, something like you wanted to know, you're on a service desk installation and you want to know the total amount of time that each incident has taken, and you have a column that shows you, okay, it took this many minutes, then you'd want a summary calculation that was to sum that.
Sure. So you can see the progress and how your service desk is functioning, or the between calls, how long it's taking typically for each call. Exactly. And so forth. Yeah.
Now some of these you may so we'll save this one, and we've got that. Everything in the domain for the most part also has a default summary. And so if I say add a summary, you'll see it's automatically now getting summed or count. And so if you ever want to know, where did this number come from when you have a summary in, you can right click. Well, that one's not. There it is. You can see here's the summary calculation it's doing, and it's going to get that from the domain however it was defined. And so I can see I have 7 unique devices. If I add a summary on this one, by default it's 7, but this is probably not what you wanted to count here, right? Because what you want to count here, you've got 7 devices, but how many operating systems are they running? Well, the default summary calculation was a count all, but here you probably want to do a count distinct, and now you know that these 7 devices are running 4 different operating systems. And again, same thing here. You might want to say which version of the agent and only count distinct so you can see how many different agent versions you have out there.
You know, Jason, every single time I go into ZRS, I find these new nuances that just blow me away, that just helps us bring things together. And I appreciate you actually walking through these different right clicks, because I keep forgetting about the right click in a browser, right? And it's just
Right.
like, just works so well.
Yeah. The other thing you'll notice is sometimes in these tabular reports, what's is there are 3 different views you can do, and sometimes you want one and sometimes you want the other. So the detailed view is the one that usually comes up with. If you do totals data, it actually hides all the actual data and just shows you the numbers.
I see.
And then if you do the details and totals, it'll do that. Now, if you had a group, you'll notice when the totals and details are on, you get group totals. So let's see if, so here you go. So these are all in the servers ZenGuru folder if I pull some more data in. So I'm looking at the whole data set instead of just the first few rows. Should be more there. You would get, for each folder, you would get the numbers, and then you'd get a grand total sum in here as well.
Sure.
All right. So I think that's a good overview of tabular stuff.
Oh, it was excellent. Thank you.
Any other questions I can answer about tables at the moment? Something maybe, Paul, whether there's something in chat or something that's occurred to you?
Nothing in chat. No, I mean it's just I have to say it's just blowing my mind, all these extra things that I'm learning today. So continue on.
So let's move on then to the next kind of report that we can do. So we're going to do chart reports, and I could spend a lot of time on chart reports, but you've got kind of the basic steps are, again, pick your data, make your report type chart, then start dragging stuff over, add your filters if needed. The thing that's different with a chart is you're doing summaries. And so you have to have at least one thing defined as a metric, something that you can do math on and you know how to do math on, and the system treats as a number in order for you to get a valid chart. Then there's a whole bunch of chart types. There's some easy, ways to make things look the way you're expecting. And so let's go ahead and jump in and show how to do some of this. And there's a couple of different reports I think we probably can look at. We did something with Service Desk earlier, so let's start this guy with maybe something around patch. So we're going to go into the ZENworks domain. The ZENworks domain is like the Uber domain. If you can't find the thing you want, it's probably in the ZENworks patch or the ZENworks domain somewhere. I'm going to pull in the patch management data, and that'll be our filter set. And I'm doing this because I know I have a lot of it, and so it makes for good visualization. And what I'm going to do is try to build us a chart that shows how patches have been released over time by different vendors. And so to do that, the first thing I'll need to do is I'll need to find something to count. And this is a time where I actually can't find the thing I want to count. So you'll see if I go in here, the things that it tells me are things like the not patched, not applicable, patched, error applicable, those kinds of things. But in this case, I don't care about counting the number of devices. I care about counting the number of patches. So another reason I picked this is because it gives us the option, or it gives me a way to show you another way you can kind of use this system. So I've got patch name here. I know those are going to be unique as they get released. And so rather than using one of the built-in measures, I can right-click this field and I can say I want to use this as a measure. And you'll notice then patch name moves to measures. Now, if I knew I wanted to have patch name used, I might need to create a copy by creating a custom measure that was the patch name. But in this case, I just want to count the number of patches. So I'm going to move this in, and you'll see in the system I have 24,486 uniquely named patches. And if I right-click here, you can see the way that it's counting as a count all. And so it's counting every patch in the system. Now I want to graph that over time of when those patches were released. So I'll add that to rows, and you'll see here I get this slider that lets me do my drill down. So you'll notice that it didn't change yet because the default is still, it's just showing me the number of patches. Before I switch this, well, I can switch it. You'll see I'm going to get a lot of bars with super readable legend down there at the bottom, right? And so that's my overall released on. If I wanted to look at maybe just a slice of data, I can highlight that data, and you'll see it zooms in.
Oh, excellent.
And maybe I want to look at this data, and now you can see there were 38 patches released on April 15th. You can reset the zoom, and it'll take you back to your original. Now, I personally don't want to look at the data this way, so let's change the chart type to something else. And I want to look at it as a line chart. And so now I have my line chart. And there's my, again, completely unreadable data. Mm-hmm. Now, that's because I'm looking at such a wide range and I'm doing it by day. So this goes back to Paul's right-click thing. One of the things that you can do on a chart like this when you have a date is you can say, how do you want to group? And so you can see it's grouping by day right now. Maybe I don't need it by every day, right? Maybe I want to look at it by month. That's what it looks like when you graph it by month.
A little bit better.
Right?
You see the trend.
Or maybe I just want to look at it by quarter.
Sure.
Right? And so this one's actually kind of interesting because it just lets you see year over year what's been happening with patches.
Amazing.
Right?
Yep.
So in 2018, I mean, we started pretty slow. Then all of a sudden we really ramped up, right? And then here it dropped down a little bit.
Sure.
My guess about why it dropped down here a little bit is because Microsoft went to their new patching model.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
For doing the cumulative patches.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're not releasing as many little patches, right? They're just rolling them up and releasing them in cumulative patches.
Cumulative, yeah.
There's less of them to actually be released. Right, and then you get the big drop because we're only 4 months into the year, and so 2020 is going to end up here eventually. But
sure.
Given where we're at. Right?
Yep.
So you can see you have the ability to do some time mapping. You can change your groupings so that you can see different periods of time. You've got hour by day, so I'm going to switch now back to the service desk domain because a lot of the reason people use the service desk domain is for some of these chart things, right? So that they can look at data over time.
For
So
status of tickets or those types of
status
things.
tickets, I'll give you a really quick one. This isn't necessarily an overtime one, but this is what's causing the most incidents on my network.
Gotcha.
Right? So we're going to use a chart type over here that's a heat map. Okay. And when I pick that chart type, I can then go ahead and say, and let's see, I'm going to break this down by category and item and item number. Right, so I'm creating my drill down, and then I want to count the number of requests on each of those. Right, so I have 246 total requests. If I drill down, here's how it looks by. This is by category, probably. Yeah. So here's the number one category is store access request. Why? Because I'm doing a lot of demonstrations, and therefore it's logging things around this. If I click into that, right, so I don't know if you caught that, but if I come in here and click on store access request, it drills into that and gives me a heat map of, okay, here are the types in that category.
Excellent.
So Office 365, BYO email, developer tools. And then if I drill into, and I guess we're at now probably the actual item. Let me go back a level.
It'll probably just give you the numbers. Yeah.
Right. So here's the SSL web server. So this is each item and which ones had how many incidents against it. And so it makes it really easy to quickly visualize, okay, the thing that's causing the most traffic on my network or most traffic to my help desk is store access requests.
So you're asking questions. This fits right into one of the questions where you have ZCM tied into ZSD and you have the store out there and you want to know how many ZCM bundles have been deployed through the store.
Correct. So you could run a report fairly easily, and I don't know that I have, because the way I've done my well, here's a good example, right? This is the pre-boot bundle type.
Sure.
You'll see I haven't been requesting ZENworks bundles because the way that I've actually implemented my store for my demo is I've created an Office 365 LDAP group, and I'm making assignments to the LDAP group.
Gotcha.
So it's not really to the bundle.
Right.
I'm not requesting the bundle. I'm requesting access to Office 365, and it's provisioning the license, the applications, all of it. So you don't see that as a bundle, but here you see the pre-boot bundle, and you can see I've had 5 requests to deploy the Windows 10 1803 bundle.
Sure.
And so you could easily visualize that here.
Yep. Perfect.
Another quick visualization that you might want to see is just by request type, right? So what percentage of my requests, get rid of this, reset this to baseline. So I want to come in here and say, show me the request type. Let's change that to chart. Request type. And then show me the percent of requests. And drill in. And so you can see I have a lot of service requests because that's how store requests come in, then incidents, and then change requests.
Right.
If you don't want to look at it that way, you can look at it as a pie chart. Now, I actually did this on purpose so I could show you another button here. So that is obviously not what I wanted, right?
No.
6.2%, 30, 3.25. I want a pie chart. The reason this has done it is because I've got these flipped columns and rows. When
Sure.
it builds that, the axes are flipped. So there's this button up here that says switch the groups that basically just flips it for you. And so now you get the view.
The other perspective, yeah. Excellent. And this is, I mean, with all the patches coming down, I mean, I'm just focusing on patches because I know that can be a task to be able to make sure all your tasks or all your patches are patched, and just being able to utilize this for patches is fantastic.
Yeah, and we'll get into some patch stuff.
Oh, okay.
Actually, towards in the more advanced stuff, because one of the reports that we've created that's out on the communities is a report that lets you get a little deeper with patches.
Perfect.
As well.
Thank you.
All right, so the last kind of report, let's see here. We looked at some of the ways to change reports. There's one other thing in here, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this one because there's documentation for reading it. But if you want to change the way that the report itself looks, you want to change the color palette. You know, maybe you don't like these colors. You want specific colors. You want to change.
You want to brand it particularly, yeah.
So you can come in here and add custom properties. And so if you click more information, it'll take you out to the Jaspersoft Advanced Chart Formatting page. And you can see here's all of the values that you can use here that let you color, change border colors and background colors and font colors and, all sorts of different, background images if you wanted them, so on and so forth.
So you can really brand it the way your corporate may want it.
Correct. Or maybe there's, something where you want data flow just a little bit differently, or you want your ticks on the page to not be the default. You can get in and really change the way those charts look.
Interesting.
All right, so the third kind of report we can create is really the data behind this, right? So if I take this chart and I just say crosstab, I'll get the data, but I'll get it in textual form, right? And so I can see 3.25 was change, 30.48 was that, so on and so forth. Let's go ahead and reset and build a new crosstab. And so if I come in here, maybe I want to look at incidents by team and then by technician. So I could come in here and say, find me the assigned team name. And you have to think a little bit here. Do you want rows or columns? You're building like a spreadsheet. You probably want rows here so that they come around here. Otherwise, you're going to be scrolling horizontally forever.
Right.
And so now there's all of that. Then I might have assigned technician underneath there. And so you'll see now they become expandable.
Gotcha. Yep.
And then you need the thing you want to count. And so you might say, I want to count the number of requests. And so then the numbers come in.
Populate.
And so if I want to take a look at the server service desk team, right, I can see Jason's holding all of those.
Gotcha.
Or I could, instead of looking at team name, if I wanted to, I could look and say, well, show me the item number. And so now I'm looking at, here's all of the items that this team supports. I wonder what this guy is, right?
Right.
What this guy is. And so in a crosstab, you can actually click on that and it'll open another view. It'll pass in what you picked, right? And then you can grab other information and throw it in there. So maybe I want to know what the identifier string is so I can figure out, what is that particular item. Let's see. I'm looking at requests at this point.
Need
So we could look and see. Hold on, let me.
want to be down
a minute. Let's look at the
subject or
and subject, right? So this will tell me for each of these. Okay, there's some SSL certificate that's happening, and this is probably unknown. I'll actually explain a little bit more about this guy. This is kind of interesting. I'm actually using ZENworks Reporting to open service desk tickets. And it's probably because it's an unknown item. But we'll check that out here in a bit. So you can see how crosstabs work. There's again some things you can do here. You can say I only want to see the top n number of values or the top bottom values. So if maybe you only want to see the top 10 in this, you don't care about everything.
Or you want to balance your teams out. Obviously, this is top heavy with Jason getting all those tickets in that one team, and you want to spread them out. You know kind of how to separate those. And
that's right. I will point out on the service desk side, one of the things I did when I designed the domain is I didn't always assume you wouldn't want to see deleted data. So you'll see down here, I've got some deleted entries. So if you don't want to see that, just make sure that you add the was item deleted as a filter and say no. And so anything now that's actually been deleted from the database will go away.
Okay.
But there's a lot of times you want to report on, data that may be being hidden by the UI from you. And so I kind of left that at your discretion.
Sure.
Again, you can change the summary. So, again, sometimes you'll get things where you're wanting to see distinct instead of all. And so maybe now I want to count by distinct, or you want to see the average of that thing. And so you can change that there as well.
So you mentioned you're using ZENworks to open up service desk tickets. Are you going to elaborate on that, or?
I am. I'm actually using ZENworks Reporting to open.
Or ZENworks Reporting, right?
And so as we get into the scheduling feature, we'll talk about that.
Okay, I'm ahead of myself. Sorry.
All right, so we talked about the different kinds of reports. Now let's talk a little bit about dashboards. So obviously over the last several releases, we've been doing a lot of dashboards in ZCC. And the dashboards we do in ZCC, we call those intelligent dashboards, actionable dashboards, because you can actually take action from there. For instance, you see a bunch of failed installations, you can cause the installation to retry. Not everybody needs access to that kind of dashboard. Sometimes you just want them to have something they can throw on a big screen, walk by periodically, and see what's going on, right? And sometimes you want data that maybe isn't surfaced yet in our dashboards. And so ZENworks Reporting allows you to create all of these different elements we've been creating, the tables and the charts and the crosstabs, and it allows you to build your own dashboard. So I'm going to show you one that's pre-built just because putting all the pieces together takes some time. But I've created this device health dashboard. And so it's made up of a set of data that's coming from a whole bunch of different places, right? So you'll see here, this first one over here is that device health indicators that we had earlier. So this data is coming from the ZENworks database, right? Tells us the operating system, the agent version, whether it's checked in the last 24 hours, when the last patch scan was. Obviously, I need to go figure out why this guy hasn't run patches, right? I know the answer. The answer is because yesterday I had a hard drive crash on my database server, and I had to restore from backup that was on the 8th of March.
696 hours.
my device has not yet rerun its scan.
Sure.
And then I have device lost. So that came from ZENworks. Then I have an install status of all the bundles on the device. They've all been successful. That came from ZENworks. But then you'll notice it starts to get interesting because this one is desktop containers launched by the device. So this is data being pulled out of the Micro Focus desktop containers database that says, what apps has this user run from desktop, or this device run from desktop containers? And so you can see it breaks out. There have been 25 launches of PuTTY. There have been 17 launches of something else. I guess that's WinSCP. 9 launches of 7-zip, so on and so forth. And then you have down here stuff that's coming out of Service Desk, which is lifetime requests by device and open requests by device. And whether they're service requests or whether they're incidents, or that's how that one breaks down. And then this one, patches installed per day by device, is a new one that I can do with 2020 that I couldn't do before. So in ZENworks, and I probably haven't installed or if I lost the data, but if I come in here in 2020 and I look at an individual device and I go to patches, if you're using ZENworks to apply patches through patch policies, you'll notice there's the new installed on field that says this is when I installed it. So normally when I had the data, this is actually a line chart over time that shows, okay, he's been installing patches so that they could, the help desk could easily say, okay, patches have been being installed
successfully. Sure.
Right. And so I've got all of this data in my dashlet, and it's all being aggregated. And if I choose another machine in here and say apply, you'll notice everything is going to get updated, and some of these are maybe going to go blank and some of these aren't, and it'll just kind of depend, right, on what I've passed through.
Sure.
So all of a sudden now I've got failed bundles. This one's I probably didn't pass things right here, and there are no requests that have been opened on these devices.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to do that, let's just take a quick look. That was the view version. If I take a look at the designer version on how did I build that, this is the view to build it. So you have all of the reports that you've built over here under existing content. So you can drag those in.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can, if you wanted to build something on the fly, you could say, I want to build a new chart, bring it in, and it'll start a new ad hoc view. You can add an image. So maybe on the top of this, you wanted a title. You could, add a title at the top and an image that's your logo, so that when you came in, you could see that. I'm not going to do that just for time's sake. The important thing I wanted to show you is this little guy right here. This is the parameter mapping dialog. And it's the magic behind when I pick something here, it impacts all of these other things. Right? And so
gotcha.
if I click here, right? What I've done is I've dragged in a filter from one of my reports. I think I probably dragged it in from the device container report or something. But then I said, okay, when I pick apply on the device name, I want you to pass that information to each of these dashlets, and here's how I want to map it. So because these ones all came from ZENworks, the device health indicators, patched installed per device, install status, those three were simple. I picked device name. The next couple are a little bit different. So these came from Service Desk. And so I had to figure out which of the fields that I'd exposed in that report.
For the same device name.
mapped to the device name,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it was the field value. And then on the desktop containers launched, it's in a field called machine name.
Gotcha.
And so since the device name in ZENworks is the same as those values in the other systems, then when I hit apply, everything refilters.
It's able to grab those. Yep.
If they don't match, then the graph will probably go blank because you don't have a way to say, okay, apply that. It applies the filter and it can no longer find any data, and so it goes blank.
Sure, sure.
So to build a dashboard is pretty simple. Again, you kind of just drag things in, and then you can go through your ad hoc process, and then it will show up here. I personally generally prefer to create the content ahead of time, so I'll build my ad hoc views and then pull it in from existing content. The reason I do that is because then they're saved separately and I can run them separately if I wanted later on. I can run this install status of all bundles on a device and just send that one chart if I want to at some point. I can reuse it in another dashboard, versus if I drag them in here, they're saved as part of the dashboard. And so if that's a common component you want to use across a couple of different dashboards, then you'd have to keep recreating it.
Sure, that makes sense.
All right, those are the basics.
Wow, great foundation.
Now we'll work on, there is one common issue I want to point out in the ad hoc builds. When you're building ad hoc, and this is especially true in the ZENworks domain because there's so many objects. If you look at the way that an ad hoc view works, let me grab one that's simple and that we have. The device health indicators one's fine. All right, so we've seen this report. As you drag stuff in over here, what it's doing behind the scenes, and this is a great button, I think it's disabled by default. So you may want to go to server settings, go to ad hoc settings, and on your account, you may want to say enable view query and ad hoc editor. That's what I've done. What this allows you to do is, as you're creating reports, we're generating a SQL query. And so this lets you see what the SQL query is that actually got generated by your report. And so if you throw something into this that is not really related, so let's see here if I can find a nice field that probably has nothing whatsoever to do with a device. Let's see. Documents are generally not related to devices, right?
Right.
So we'll add documents, and you'll see now asset management shows up in here, and here's documents, and I'll add document ID in here, and all of a sudden you'll see that happened, right? There's no longer any data in your report.
Right.
The reason that happened is because somewhere in the domain, there is in fact, a document probably links to a contract, and a contract probably links to a device. And so there is a way to connect them if you try really hard. And so the ad hoc tool went through and created a monster query that tried to get those things to connect to each other.
Sure.
Because there were joins defined in the domain that it could find that would get you there. But the answer is, in the real world, that data is not related to each other. And so when you run the query, it comes back empty.
Empty.
Right? In a lot of the ones that I've done, as far as the domains, we don't have that problem, and that's actually why we've started to do the bundle domain and the patch domain and those kinds of things, because there are so many times when data just doesn't relate to each other. It's better to have a smaller domain than give you the option and cause that problem. So you'll notice here, if I come in here and I say I want to report on users and teams, everything else goes blank, because this is for reporting on like team membership. And so I can't marry it with any of these other things, because if I do, then you'll get bad data. Instead, you'll see that this same data around teams and users gets repeated in a couple different places. So here's the assigned team, here's the assigned technician. And so by bringing it in, behind the scenes, we've defined a set of joins that make sure that you can't end up in a bad place.
Gotcha.
Okay. So that's a pretty common issue. Try reducing what you've got. You may need, put something in the communities. We can answer those.
Sure.
How am I doing on time, Paul?
You're doing good on time. We got about 30 minutes left, so
Okay.
we're still looking good.
All right, great. So we talked about custom fields and measures. I'm not going to go too much more into that. But here's a good example of another thing. So I showed you earlier the hours elapsed thing. There's a days elapsed thing.
Right.
Sometimes you don't have the data the way you want it, right? Now, this one's kind of, so cost of ticket, right? So we were trying to put together a, financial dashboard for a ticket. And we did, just for purpose of, showing what you could do with a custom field. And so we created this cost of ticket, and we said, we know that each incident costs us about $50. We know that each change request costs us about 100, and we know each service request costs us 75. And so the way that this, we created a new calculated field. We used the if and did a nested if. There's actually a case now that didn't used to exist. But we used if, and we said it, so if the request type ends up being this incident, then I want you to fill in the value cost of ticket as 50. Change, fill it in 100. If it's a service request, fill it in as 75. If it's anything else, right, then leave it blank.
Right.
And so when we run that report, this is what we end up with. We had a change request with a $100 cost. We have these 12 tickets. They cost us 600. And then we have these 2 tickets that cost us 150. We sum it up. The grand total of what we've, saved the company or whatever, what it's cost us to run the service desk is this, right? So, a lot of that is subjective. You'd have to know, how much does each incident cost me? Or you might, for instance, maybe you're trying to show your boss, what is the value of ZENworks from a bundle delivery perspective or from a patch perspective? Well, maybe you calculate and you say, I know that for each bundle, or, maybe if the bundle is in this folder, it's a complex bundle and it would have taken 2 hours of people's times. And if it's in this other folder, it would have taken 30 minutes of someone's time. And so you could create something like this that then said, okay, every month ZENworks is saving us,
X amount of dollars.
$50,000.
Yeah, or this is the cost of SneakerNet versus this bundle being built. All the work's done in the front end, and then you're just deploying it as opposed to SneakerNet around or emailing or whatever. So yes,
Exactly.
same type thing. Sure.
So that, that's just another example. Sometimes you end up in, you'll have basically the data in a form in the database the way you want it. or not the way you want it, and so you need to massage it into what you
Right.
want.
You put
This
weights
is
or whatever.
right.
Right.
Another one, you've got like concatenate here. So for instance, maybe I can't remember if I did this in the service desk domain, but I might not have a full name field. And so you might create a field called full name and then concatenate first and last.
Oh, see.
And then
Yeah.
you could use that in your report.
Mm-hmm.
So lots of flexibility there. All right, next, scheduling reports and notifications. So once you've built out all of this stuff, the next thing you might want to do is get it to people on a regular recurring basis so they don't have to go in and manually run these reports every time. So these are the steps. You create the report. We've done that. You specify a schedule. You configure the filters. You specify the output, and you define the notification. So I told you earlier I'm using ZRS to open service desk tickets.
Yes.
So let's see if I can find what's happening. Okay, so I have a report that I have here called the Expiring Certificates View Report. And my guess is right this minute, it's empty. So if I was to run it, if all is well in ZenGuru land, then this report's going to come back empty.
Very good.
This report says, do I have a report in the system that expires in the next 60 days? Or a certificate that expires in the next 60 days. If I changed this to, say, apply 365 days, it might. That's 365. Well, part of the problem is I'm doing equals, right? So I'd have to know the exact date.
Oh, right, sure.
Right. And so the reason I set it up this way is because I only want to open the ticket the day it happens. I don't want to open it every day.
Correct. Yeah, that makes sense.
So basically what I've done is I've said run a report, and if there's a certificate that expires 60 days from today, there will be data in here, and it will have the name of the certificate, the expiration of the certificate, so on and so forth.
So you schedule that every day, and then if you have data
Right.
in there, you deliver that.
Right. So if I look at the schedule, right, here's my schedule. I've created this daily check for expiring certificates. I've said I want to run it immediately because that was when I started it. I'm going to have it recur every day, so it's running each day. It's going to run indefinitely. It's going to run on holidays.
Gotcha.
Doesn't matter. I'm going to go to the parameters tab, and this is where I could change this. So again, these are the same filters I defined in the report. So if I manually was running this, I could come in here and specify something different.
Sure.
I could do that here. So think about a situation where maybe what you're creating is a device health report that you send out, and you're sending it out to each of your branch office administrators. So you might come in here and you'd create the report one time, the device health report, but then maybe you have a department filter.
Right.
And you could create that schedule to run that report to run 5 different times, but put a different department in each time.
Gotcha.
So
Yep.
every day it would run that report 5 times, and then it would output and send to the appropriate people for each department. Then the output options are, what do you want to do output-wise? So in my case, I'm saying I want to output to PDF, so I'm going to create an attachment that's PDF. I'm going to override it because I don't want to, keep a whole bunch of them around. And then you'll notice down here there's an output destination. The output destination is where do you want to send it to. In my case, I don't want to send it anywhere. I don't want to upload it anywhere. I'm going to attach it to an email. But if you had, let's say, a web server and you wanted to set up things so that they're not having to log into ZRS and do anything, but you've got a web server out there that you set up, and you can just FTP files or drop them into a particular folder and say, I want to export that as HTML, then you can make it so that they could then hit that report every day at that same web link.
Sure.
Or you can output it right into the repository. I don't like to do this. This puts it in the ZENworks Reporting database. And so then under this folder, reports, scheduled reports, you would actually see every time that ran, you'd see the result there.
Okay.
Or you can put it on the local file system. So on the ZRS server, you could put it in the local file system. In my case, though, I'm just doing email. So I've got it creating a PDF. My notification, if I looked in Service Desk, let's do that because we can. So here's my Service Desk. If I went over here to Teams, I think that's probably my server Service Desk. You'll see this is the address.
Same address, yeah.
So that's the address I'm sending it to. I give it a certificate's expiring in 60 days. And then I give it a message. And then I say include the report file as an attachment. So if I go back over here and look at service requests and look at all, my guess is if I come in here and look for active ones, because they're all going to be closed at this point, and I think my certificate usually expires there they are. Okay, so I created this as an incident. And so you can see I've got certificates expiring in 60 days. That came in from my server. And if I looked at the note or the attachments tab, it will have had that PDF that came from ZRS. And so this is what it looks like when there actually is data that comes out.
Gotcha.
So that's, someone sees that, they go in here, they can then go pick that item, assign that item to the incident, and they're good to go.
Brilliant.
So don't limit yourself thinking, I can only use this to send an email to somebody. You could actually use this to send an email to some system that then takes
action
as well.
Action on
and then
that.
You'll notice here, this is a really important box for this. Don't send the email for empty reports. So if I didn't have this box checked, then I'd be getting a new incident every day.
That answered my question that I was going to ask earlier on, but I just was patient. There it is.
All right. So that's scheduling reports.
We're looking about 15 minutes.
That's about right.
Perfect.
The last thing I want to talk about today is ad hoc topics. I don't know that you'll dive right into this right away, but this is actually, so, Paul, you said you're always learning stuff on this.
Absolutely.
I'm always still learning stuff on this too. So I did a partner training about a year ago, and somebody challenged me and said, how do I do X? And I said, gee, I don't know how you do that without us putting together a new domain. And then I realized topics exist. So topics are created with Jasper Studio. Jasper Studio is a full-on report designer. Personally, I'm still learning a lot about this. This is kind of the thing I'm trying to get most familiar with right now. But I don't want you to have to know that much about it. Topics are cool because they basically allow you to quickly write a SQL query and turn that into something you can use in ad hoc reports.
Okay.
So you create a blank report, and when you create your blank report, as part of that report, you'll create a data set and query. And so when you use this is when you have something you want that you know is in the database, but that maybe Micro Focus hasn't exposed. So in this particular case, we had added the patch compliance dashboard in ZCC. And he said, I want to be able to get that in ZRS, but I want to be able to filter it by operating system name so I can see compliance per OS. I'm like, well, we didn't make operating system name something you could filter that on. How do you do that? Well, I went in and understood the structure, and then I had to handwrite the query. That's, if you're a SQL person, that's not too bad. If you're not, drop me an email with what you're trying to do, and maybe I can find a way to get you the SQL query.
Sure.
But basically, it allows you to handwrite the SQL query instead. You can add in things like OS name. This is called a parameter that says I'm going to do a filter so that I can look at things by OS. And then once you have that, you'll have fields that it got defined. The fields will match whatever you called them in the data query. So that's why when you saw my query here, I said find product name as, and then I put it at something friendly, because this is what the user's going to see in the ad hoc report they create. And so when you're all done, you can say publish this file to the Jasper report server and put it in this special folder, ad hoc components topics. When you do that, and you say create new, you'll see that those topics now show up. The ones with the data cans by them are domains, the others are topics. So these are things where you've, or I've in this case, created a topic, and you talked earlier about patch reporting. So this is one of the ones that I built.
Okay.
Is this patch policy compliance details topic, and it's posted on Cool Solutions. It works for SQL. I don't know that we've done it for Oracle yet.
Okay.
But this allows you to then say, show me what my patch policy compliance is. Maybe I'll start with the not the details view, but the patch policy compliance. So patch policy compliance means different things to different people, but to me, patch policy compliance meant if you're a device and you're assigned to a policy and there are patches in there that you don't have, you're not compliant. So if I was to come in here, this will actually let me say, show me the patch policy name. It's interesting. Expect to have data. Show me the patch policy name and the patches not applied count. And maybe I need crosstab for this. I can't remember. I'm actually thinking I may have a problem because I've moved my patch data to Vertica, so it may not be there. Come to think of it right now. Okay, so if you do this on a non-Vertica system, you actually can see for every patch policy, are all of the devices in that compliant or not compliant? So here's an example of the patch policy compliance report that you could do. This is the community download for this topic. And so you can see here, I have a patch policy compliance, or a patch policy called Java Updates that was compliant, and another one called Microsoft Patches that was not compliant. And then the details topic allowed me to create a table underneath there that said, for each device, are they compliant to all of their policies or not? If they're not, you could actually put policy in the list and see which policies they're not compliant to, and then what the overall compliance percentage is against that.
Okay.
But it's done at a per policy perspective instead of the default in ZENworks compliance, patch compliance is you have every patch you're supposed to have or not.
Sure. I do have a question on chat, and this goes back to topics, and